Hi guys. So in our last recording, we looked at the learning guide. We went through the learning guide. Now we are going to go through what is history. So in this lecture, we're going to look at history, defining history as an academic discipline in a very concrete way. So history is more than the recounting of events of the past. So it's a fascinating exploration of human life and society. So in our lectures this semester, we'll delve into various aspects of the past societies, connecting them to current developments and future aspirations. So think of history as a story of humanity over time, a careful examination of the past backed by evidence. It's very important, backed by evidence. So evidence forms the foundation of historical inquiry, providing new materials for teaching and learning. So history goes beyond being a mere subject that examines the past. History is not about memorizing all these dates and events without context. So it involves an active process of inquiry and interpretation. So we look at the context, that's very important. We look at the causes, we look at the consequences of historical events. So we look at the changes that have shaped human affairs, influencing the patterns of life in society. So history helps us understand the current social, the political, the religious, and the economic conditions. So without the knowledge of history, we cannot have a background of our religion, of our customs, institutions, our practices, traditions, behaviors within a particular society or community. So, including social norms, rituals, and conventions that are collectively accepted by members of a society. So, in this lecture, we're going to deal with the meaning and the nature of history. So, looking at the first slide, so the concept of history. So history is said to be the queen mother of all social sciences. It is the basis of all subjects of study which fall under the category of humanities and social sciences. So it is the basis of the study of your philosophy, your politics, your economics, and even art and religion. So history is the analysis and the interpretation of the human past, enabling us to study continuity and the changes that are taking place over time. So it is an act of investigation. We are investigating. We also use our imagination to seek and explain how people have changed over time. So historians use all forms of evidence to examine, to interpret, and revisit the past. So the different interpretations of the past, it allows us to see the present differently and therefore imagine, and work towards different futures. So the slide here it says defining history. So the origin of the word history is associated with a Greek word called historia, which means information or an inquiry designed to elicit truth. So history has been defined differently by different scholars. So the following quotations right in front of you, they indicate the meaning and scope of history. So Burkhardt says history is the record of what one age finds worthy of note in another. And then Henry Johnson, he says history in its broadest sense is everything that has ever happened. And then Rapin says history is a connected account of the course of events or progress of ideas. And Insert says history is the scientific study of the past happenings in all other aspects in the life of social group in the light of present happenings. So we can see, guys, from the above definitions, history is explained as a significant record of events of the past. So a meaningful story of mankind telling us what happened to man and why it happened. So history is both a science and an art. So their opinions are very much divided on whether history is a science or an art. So history is social science and art. It draws on literary scholars and the social science. So it is what we call a hybrid discipline. It has elements of both humanities and social sciences at the same time. So it is a hybrid discipline. So how do historians approach the past? So within our societies, we have something called individual memory or collective memory. So all groups, they have a sense of the past and they tend to use it to reinforce their own beliefs and sense of identity. So is memory perfect? Do you guys think memory is perfect? So we know that individual, social, and collective memory, it can be faulty, guys, right? So we draw on memories to make sense of our life stories, to affirm our identities. Our memories, guys, it's our data bank, right? So our political judgments are influenced by a sense of the past, and all societies possess memory. So in what we call social memory, there are different dimensions to social memory. So what is social memory? So social memory, these are the stories and experiences that will bring a group together. So it's like the glue that holds them together. It helps them understand their identity. So it's the experiences that have formed the group over time. So they have formed the group over time. It's the things that make us who we are as a group, our identity as a group. So sometimes it's the accepted beliefs of the origins of the group. So it's the origins of the group. And it's also a shared history that brings people together. It can be the origins of a nation or history of a community. So it's the shared memory that makes people feel connected and to understand their identity. So social memory of past oppression. So it social memory of past oppression, it can serve to sustain a sense of oppression, exclusion, or adversity. So this would be when a group remembers difficult or unfair things that they have faced. So this memory helps them understand why things are the way they are or why things are against them. And it can motivate them to work together to make a positive change. So far, we have social memory, which is a shared story, and then memory of past oppression, remembering tough times to make the group stick together and make things better, right? And then, so how do historians deal with the past? So there's something called historicism, right? And it is about studying history for its own sake. This is very important. So historicism believes in studying history for its own sake. So historicism says to us the autonomy of the past must be respected or recognized. It must be respected or recognized. The past is different from the present. We're going to unpack this further. So each age is unique. So remember now, keeping in mind the first two bullets. Um, so historicism is about we're studying the past for its own sake. The autonomy, historicism says the autonomy of the past, it must be respected or recognized that the past is very different from the present. So age group, each age, I mean, is very unique throughout history. So each age, we see that it has its own set of values, it has its own culture, it even has its own understanding of what it means to be a human being. So historians must strive to understand each age in its own terms. So instead of imposing our own values and our own priorities, we must understand each age in its own terms. This is going to become clearer as we go. So we need to see through the eyes of the past, guys. There are people called historicists. These were people who were part of the intellectual movement of historicism. So these guys said you need to get into the minds of the people who lived in the past. Remember, understanding history for its own sake and respecting the autonomy of the past. So these people said we need to get into the minds of the people who lived in the past. We need to understand the world through their eyes and not impose our present day understanding of the world on the past. So to understand the past, we have to detach from the present, our present judgmental ways, and we have to really understand the past in its own terms. So staying detached from the current mess, we are able to enable good historical research. So historical awareness, understood by these historicists, it had three principles. So keeping in mind those very two important points I told you about understanding history for its own sake and respecting the past for its autonomy. Okay, so there are three principles. Historical awareness was understood by historicists through three principles. So the first principle was difference. So we must recognize the past is very different from the present. So nothing in history stands still. So the passage of time, the passage of time, it alters how we live, right? So we must not assume people in the past, they behaved or thought the way that we do. So earlier generations had different mentalities, they had different values, they had different priorities, and they had different fears and hopes. So, for an example, okay, looking at nature, we see nature as this beautiful thing, right? You go for a hike, you go for walks, and you're like, oh, and you observe nature and you think it's the most beautiful thing. But medieval men and women, they were terrified of the forest and mountains. They stayed far away from forests and mountains. And then another example would be in the 18th century in rural England, separation and remarriage was something achieved by means of public wife sale. There were public wife sales in the 18th century in England. So it was in part a reaction to the virtual impossibility of legal divorce for the poor. So looking at it from today's perspective, so it's normal back then in 18th century England, that's how divorces were dealt with. But now I'm going to look at it from today's perspective. It's tough not to notice how this reflects a strong patriarchal values that were that implied the humiliation of the wife, leading her, to the market in a halter. So the first thing we just went through is difference. So the second principle is context. So we are putting the otherness um, in context. So the purpose is not to uncover the strangeness of the past, but guys, it's to explain it. Like right now, we just explained those two examples. It's not to say it's strange, but it's just to say we need to explain it. Why was it so? So this means placing it in historical context. So what may seem bizarre to us becomes, we understand it. It's shocking, yes, but you understand the society of that particular time. So we have to understand the broader historical context of that time. Remember, we have to go back and look at history through the eyes of those people living at that time. Okay. So I have an example here for you. So, for example, witchcraft accusations. So remember, we're dealing with context now, the second principle. So witchcraft accusations in early modern Europe, this was rooted in a combination of societal, religious, and cultural factors. So the religious climate of that time, it was full of fear, guys. It was absolutely full of fear. The social and economic changes occurring, people used witchcraft as an scapegoat to all the changes that were happening around them, socially and economically. Patriarchy and gender norms, certain women, they did not fit the criteria to be witches. Um, the certain women, they did fit the criteria to be witches because they deviated from the gender norms. So they became targets during this period. And there was also folk belief, superstition. It caused a lot of suspicion. It was easy to just cry out, this person is a witch, because of all these factors. And the legal system of that time, it complicated things even more. It did not adhere to the modern standards that we have. So context, it needs to be respected, respecting the autonomy of the past. So context needs to be respected at every point. The economic, the social setting, the state at that time, the policy, the religion at that time, and the education during that time. Okay, so the third principle is historical process. So, or the historical continuum. So this is how events are connected over time. You're going to see with the examples that we are going to have throughout our lectures looking at different societies. So we're looking at how events are connected over time. So events in relation to each other, the relationship between events over time, and how we got from then to now. So we have historical awareness and we have social memory, which are not the same. So the question is now, is historical awareness and popular social memory in opposition? So we have those guys, we call them historicists. Remember, with the historicism movement, remember what I said at the very beginning? So these historicists, they tell us that awareness means respecting the autonomy of the past, right? Understanding the past in its own terms. So historians, like historicists, they spent a lot of time studying original sources, which we call primary sources. So primary sources will include things like diaries, letters, interviews, oral histories, photographs, newspaper articles, magazines, government documents, official records, and speeches, and so on. So these historicists, guys, they set aside present ideas. They used empathy and imagination. So we look at popular historical knowledge. It is selective. Popular historical knowledge is very selective, and it is influenced by present thought and assumptions. It's not based, on deep research. So it focuses on specific parts of the past. It is shaped by the ideas that people have today. So there's a gap between professionals and the general public approach to history. So professionals, they dig deep, they look at all these primary sources, they are unbiased. And popular knowledge, it's very selective and it's influenced by current events. So the distorting effects of tradition. So respect for tradition is sometimes confused with a sense of history, and therefore there's a desire to keep faith with it. So societies, they change because of things like social hierarchies, political structure, and these changes happen over time. You're going to see there are going to be many examples we're going to look at in our lectures that are to come. So traditions, guys, traditions are very powerful. So the ruling group, it can make up a tradition. It can literally make up a tradition to boost its reputation. So we should then look at we should look at the historical circumstances that tradition comes from. So tradition is as a guide to life, it can lead to very unfortunate results. So looking at the invented tradition of nationalism, for example, so nations, they're a product of history, right? So understanding tradition is very important, especially when it comes to nations and nationalism. So nationalism is a shared identity and loyalty to a particular nation. It emphasizes common culture, history, language, and shared territory. So tradition can create a sense of identity, a sense of togetherness for people. Um, so identity characteristics, qualities, beliefs, and affiliations that make a group distinct or recognizable. It has various aspects. It has personal, social, cultural, and national dimensions. Okay, so tradition can be used to create a sense of belonging, a sense of legitimacy, right? So I have an example there for you. So an example would be, okay, that's the definition there. So an example would be, oh, did I put the example? Oh, I do. Okay, so an example would be the War of Independence. It is a heritage for all Americans. So they identify themselves with liberty. America identifies itself with liberty, self-reliance, and they are honest, guys. Okay, America is honest. So the next slide, we're going to look at the nostalgia within history. So tradition, it ignores that things change over time, right? So another way people misunderstand history is through nostalgia. So you guys, are you keeping note of all these ways that people misunderstand history? So next up, people misunderstand it through nostalgia. So this is other distortions of awareness. So nostalgia will be looking at it, looking at the past, and instead of seeing it as a mixture of good and bad changes, it sees things as changing for the worse. So it's nostalgia is actually backward thinking. It's looking at history with a feeling of loss. And here's an example that is so common in South Africa. So people who habitually complain that the country is going to the dogs and that things were better during the apartheid government. You can see I have a little picture there that says, was the past really better? Was it really better? What was it better for who? Okay. So nostalgia, it gives a one-sided view of history. It's very unreliable, guys. So it is a characteristic of societies going through rapid changes. It is redesigning the past, and it's making it's giving this person who's nostalgic a comfy escape. So it's making the past seem better. It's selective memory. It ignores the tough realities of others. So nostalgia is not a reliable guide to the past. It's more like a dream of a perfect time. So we end up removing the features of the past. The past becomes simpler, it's better than the present, and it's basically selective amnesia, guys. So dismissing the past. So we have nostalgia, right, which sees the past as a time of loss. So now progress is an optimistic belief that not only has the past changed for the better, but improvement, it will continue into the future. So progress has a positive value on change. So it's seeing history as an ongoing record of material and moral improvements. So for example, something we're going to be doing is tracing human society from primitive stage to civilization. Exciting times ahead of us, guys. So tradition, nostalgia, and progress, they provide us with the basic components of social memory. Tradition, nostalgia, and progress provide us with the components of social memory. So they are fundamental components of social memory. So they prioritize belief over genuine inquiry. So historians play a big role in challenging these the conventional version. So historians, they play a crucial role in challenging socially and motivated misrepresentations of the past. So when it comes to the overlap, So when it comes to the overlap between history and social memory, we can see that the relationship between history and social memory, it's quite complex. So that is our What is History lecture. Nice and short and sweet. So thank you guys for taking the time to listen to this lecture and paying attention, I hope. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. And in the first recording I made in our learning guide, I did put up my times when I am in my office. You can even first email me before you come see me, or you can show up during my consultation times. But please, guys, if you do not understand anything, I'm more than happy to go over it again, to explain it. And I will be seeing you at our in-person tutorials slash consultations next week, the other Monday, not the first Monday, the second Monday. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed the lecture. Goodbye.